You probably did it today. Maybe you were looking for something you misplaced and you said out loud, "Where did I put it?" Maybe you were working through a problem and you heard yourself muttering the steps. Maybe you caught your own reflection and said something. Maybe you were driving and reacted to traffic with a full sentence directed at nobody. You talk to yourself. And if you think that is slightly odd, slightly embarrassing, or a sign of something not quite right, the research says you have it exactly backwards. Talking to yourself is not a quirk. It is not a symptom. It is one of the most sophisticated cognitive tools available to the human brain, and the people who do it most fluently tend to think more clearly, regulate their emotions more effectively, and perform better under pressure than the people who do not. The technical term for it is private speech. Developmental psychologist Lev Vygotsky, writing in the early 20th century, was the first to study it systematically, and what he found disrupted everything that psychologists at the time believed about language and thought. Vygotsky noticed that young children narrate everything they do. They talk themselves through tasks out loud, step by step, as if the words themselves are helping them accomplish the action. He argued that this was not random chatter. It was thinking made audible. The child was using language as a tool for cognitive control, a way of directing attention, organizing action, and guiding behavior through a process that had not yet been fully internalized. As children grow older, the narration goes quiet. The speech turns inward and becomes what Vygotsky called inner speech, the silent conversation you have with yourself that underlies almost all of your thinking. The words are no longer spoken, but the structure, the self-directed quality, the thinking through language, all of it remains. Private speech does not disappear when you grow up. It goes underground. And for many people in many situations, it surfaces again when the task is hard enough or the pressure is high enough or the stakes are significant enough to need the extra cognitive scaffolding that audible self-talk provides. Psychologist Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan has spent years studying self-talk, and his research has produced findings that are striking in their specificity. One of his most significant discoveries involves the language people use when they talk to themselves. When people talk to themselves using the first person, using the word I, they tend to get pulled deeper into whatever emotional experience they are processing. I feel terrible. I cannot do this. I do not know how to handle this. The first-person framing keeps them inside the problem, immersed in the emotional experience, which makes it harder to think clearly about it. But when people shift to talking about themselves in the third person, using their own name or the word you, something functionally different happens. Instead of "I cannot do this," they say something like, "You can handle this." Or they say their own name. What does Sarah need to do right now? This small linguistic shift creates what Kross calls psychological distance. You are no longer fully inside the experience. You have stepped slightly outside it, observing it rather than being consumed by it, and from that small distance, you have significantly more cognitive access to your own resources. This is not a metaphor. Kross and his team measured it in brain imaging studies. The third-person self-talk activated different neural patterns than first-person self-talk. It reduced activation in areas associated with emotional reactivity and increased activation in areas associated with self-regulation and deliberate thinking. Talking to yourself in the third person is physiologically different from talking to yourself in the first person. It changes what your brain is doing. Athletes have known something like this for decades without the neuroscience to explain it. The research on instructional self-talk, the kind where you give yourself specific technical cues during performance, shows consistent improvements in motor skill acquisition and execution under pressure. When a tennis player says "bend your knees" or when a golfer says "smooth takeaway," they are not just reminding themselves of technique. They are directing attention precisely, suppressing competing thoughts, and keeping performance-relevant processes in the foreground of awareness. The words do something that intention alone does not. Research by psychologist Alison Wood Brooks at Harvard Business School found that talking to yourself specifically in the form of self-advice, asking yourself "what should I do" rather than "what am I feeling," shifts cognitive processing in measurable ways. The question form activates a problem-solving orientation rather than a rumination orientation. Instead of cycling through feelings, you are generating options. The structure of the self-talk shapes the structure of the thinking. And there is a deeper layer still. Neuroscientist Charles Fernyhough at Durham University has studied the relationship between inner speech and consciousness, and his work suggests that the inner voice is not just a tool for thinking about tasks. It is a core component of how you construct your sense of self across time. The ongoing internal monologue is part of what creates the feeling of being a continuous person with a coherent identity. You are not just using language to solve problems. You are using language to maintain the story of who you are. This is why disruptions to inner speech, as can occur in certain psychiatric conditions, can be profoundly disorienting. When the inner voice is experienced as alien or intrusive or not one's own, the sense of self becomes unstable. The voice that you usually take as the most intimate expression of your own subjectivity is suddenly experienced as other. The experience reveals how much of what you think of as your inner life, your continuous sense of being yourself, depends on this ongoing linguistic conversation with yourself that you almost never notice because it never stops. But back to the more ordinary version. The talking out loud, the muttering, the self-directed instructions, the questions you ask when nobody is listening. Why does the audible version persist into adulthood, even after the inner speech has taken over most of the work? The research suggests it is because audible self-talk adds something that inner speech cannot fully replicate. When you say something out loud, you hear it. And hearing yourself say something engages the auditory processing systems in your brain in addition to the language production and comprehension systems that are already involved in inner speech. You are feeding the information back through an additional channel. The words enter the world and come back to you as sound, creating what psychologists call an external memory loop that can stabilize and clarify thought in ways that purely internal processing sometimes cannot. This is why people talk to themselves when they are lost, when they are building something complicated, when they are trying to remember a sequence, when they are anxious. The external loop grounds the thought in something more solid than pure internal processing. You can hear yourself saying it, which is different from just thinking it, even if what you are saying is simply the thought made audible. And it turns out the benefit extends beyond the person doing the talking. Psychologist Gary Lupian at the University of Wisconsin found that saying the name of an object out loud, even when you already know what you are looking for, significantly improves your ability to find it visually. When participants said the word apple while searching for an apple in a visual display, they found it faster than when they searched in silence. The verbal label activated perceptual systems in the brain that made the target more cognitively prominent, more findable. Talking to yourself about what you are looking for helps you see it. Which means the next time you wander into a room and say out loud, "What did I come in here for?" you are not losing your mind. You are using one of the most distinctly human cognitive tools available to you. You are doing what your brain evolved to do with language, not just communicate with others, but communicate with yourself, direct your own attention, regulate your own emotions, and think more clearly than you could in silence. You probably did it today. And now you know it was not a sign of anything odd. It was a sign of a brain doing exactly what human brains do.